Hi, and welcome back to Sailing Vessel MiG. This particular video is all about water makers. Well, specifically, it's about my water maker. Oh, and I wanted to tell you a little funny thing. If you notice that my voiceover sounds a lot better this time, it's because up until now I have been speaking into the back side of my mic like an idiot. I did not realize it, obviously, or I wouldn't have been doing it, but yeah. So so now that I've told you how stupid I am, I want you to listen to me and let me tell you what I think about water makers on a boat. So anyway, okay. The question is, do you need a water maker on a sailboat, specifically for offshore cruising? And James from Tritea, I guess it is. I like his channel a lot, and he's doing a little learn how to cruise seminar thing, several videos, and one of them is, what do you need and what do you not need? And he specifically says adamantly that you do not need a water maker on a sailboat, especially for offshore voyaging. And I am going to disagree with him here. First of all, James says no, but James is a solo sailor. And if you're a solo sailor, you might not need a water maker. Maybe. We'll get into that in a little bit. But if you have a crew, even two people, or a family on Wandering Dolphin, of course, we had 5 kids, 2 adults, 7 of us. On a 38-day passage, you go through a lot of water. Even if that family is very good at conserving water, which my family is. If you have a crew, you obviously need to make sure that your crew is taken care of and that they have the water that they need. Remember, you can live without food for, quite a few weeks actually, but you can only live without water for about 4 days. And essentially, you are talking about a desert. You're actually going out into a desert, and you're sailing a boat that has the potential to be sitting out there for quite a long time waiting for wind. Your engine can quit, which in James's case on Tritea, his engine did quit, and he relied on his sailing. And at one point, he lost his rudder and had to sail. In those cases, having the backup and the ability to make water is, in my opinion, essential. If you were going to cross the Sahara Desert and you were going to just take, say, a dog sled, and it was a dog sled in the desert, and you had the ability to turn sand into water, and you didn't have to carry all of your water for however long you think, and you don't even know for sure how long it's going to take you. You have an idea, but you don't know for sure. How much would that be worth to you if you were going to do that? And not if you were just going to do it once, but if you were essentially going to do this all the time. This is what you're doing on your home. Your home is out in the desert, and you had the ability to turn sand into water. Most people would say, yeah, you're crazy if you don't do that. If that's not considered an essential piece of equipment, you'd be nuts. And that's how I feel. I really do believe that you need a water maker. And I'm not talking about a little hand pump. Emergency water maker, those, they work for a while, and then the casing breaks, as in the case of Jerome Rand on Sailing into Oblivion. Plus, the amount of water you get from those is so minimal. So my recommendation is the Katadyn Power Survivor 40E, which I'm rebuilding as we speak. You can see me rebuilding this water maker. And that is one of the reasons that I recommend this water maker. I am in no way a great mechanical genius, and yet I've rebuilt this water maker 4 times. And not because it needs it to be rebuilt a lot, but because it's a 12-year-old water maker that's made hundreds of gallons of water. You can replace the membrane on this for about $300 as opposed to $600 or $1,200 for the bigger water makers and their membranes. This water maker only draws 4 amps. And this is a fact. based on years and years of use in a real world scenario where all of our water was produced by this water maker that you're looking at. We had two Kyocera 135 watt panels, and they were in parallel, so we had 270 watts of solar. And during the day, we ran this water maker for 3 to 5 hours, depending on how much water we needed. And that provided all the water we needed for a whole family of 7 all the time. We never had to haul water when we were using this water maker. If you do not have a water maker, you have to haul water. You're basically turning your dinghy fuel, or your muscle, I guess, of rowing ashore into water. You have to go and buy water. In the Bahamas, water's expensive. As I've said, it actually costs more than fire and whole rum. So yeah, makes sense. This little water maker draws 4 amps, which is about the same as my refrigerator. And during the day, you can run it with just solar, and you can produce all the water you need. Now, offshore on our 38-day passage, we had a little bit of an issue with this water maker because it does not have a lot of head pressure. And Wandering Dolphin, when it was sailing, she sailed fairly fast. Although there were lots of days that she sailed really slow because the wind was only blowing 3 knots. But hey, it was still moving. But when the boat was moving through the water, we had an issue with it sucking the water up through the through hull and into the water maker. And we had to add a lift pump, which then basically doubled the power consumption of the water maker, which that isn't good. So what I did on this boat is I turned my clamshell through hull forward, so it's pulling water up into the water maker when I'm sailing offshore. I'll let you know how that goes. I've never tried that before. It was just a thought I had to try to avoid the idea that I would need a lift pump. So, the rebuildability on this, the Katadyn makes such a good rebuild kit with such good instructions that you can tear the whole thing apart, just like you see me doing here. You clean up all the parts. You put some grease on all of the O-rings and reinstall all the O-rings just as it shows you in very good instructions, and then put it all back together. And she kicks on and runs. And at that time, that's a good time to change out your membrane if you're going to change out the membranes. But in this case, I also carry a spare membrane with me offshore, and I carry a rebuild kit. So even offshore, I would be able to pull this apart and rebuild it. Now, the other nice thing about this water maker is if all the power goes out on the boat for whatever reason, lightning strike or whatever, it has a large handle. Not just a tiny little handle like in the emergency water makers, but a good size handle that will pump this Clark pump, which is a high pressure Clark pump, and it is hard work to pump it. But with that more leverage on that bigger handle, it actually is easier to pump this one and make 1.5 gallons an hour than it is to use the little emergency life raft one and make a tiny little bit of water, just enough to survive. So that's another plus to this Power Survivor 40E water maker. They also tend to be a little less money to purchase. They're not cheap, however. I think they go for about $3,500 right now. That's not cheap. But again, the desert scenario. What is it that you spend your money on your boat? You spend your money on things that they're safety. Safety items get a priority, and to say that a water maker is not a safety item, in my opinion, is I don't think that that's accurate. I think you're a little crazy, actually. I think that, okay, so what if you only had $4,000 left to spend? Your boat's ready to go. Say it's ready to go, but it has a ratty mainsail and no water maker. You can get one or the other. You can get a new mainsail, or you can get a water maker. Which would I get? Honestly, I would get the mainsail. Absolutely, 100%. That, however, does not mean that the water maker is not important. So would I stay an extra 2 months and earn enough money to get the water maker and the mainsail? Absolutely. Yes. So you don't, just because one thing's more important than another, you don't rule out the other one. You say, okay, what are the things that I absolutely don't want to go on long offshore passages, especially all the way around the world without? And in my opinion, a Watermaker, it absolutely meets that list. Now, does a well, we could go through lists of things, and maybe I should sometime for a video, but this is about Watermakers. So, uh, rain catching, it does work. Let me give you an example. And I'm not saying, obviously, that Watermakers aren't worth it, but you can survive in other ways. But are you guaranteed to be able to survive? That's the question. On our 38-day passage, because we were having so much trouble getting the Watermaker to actually work without heaving to for 2 or 3 hours to make water, which you don't want to do that every other day, right? You don't want to heave to every time you have to make water and stop your progress. So we basically relied for most of that 38-day passage on rain squalls. Now, we were going through the doldrums, and we would actually aim for squalls instead of avoiding squalls. We would aim for them, and I would go up on the deck. And in one case, we were fairly low on water, and I filled the tanks completely in, probably a half hour to 45 minutes of a downpour. I swear, when I looked up at the sky, I could have drowned. It was that much water coming out. It was like somebody dumping bathtubs of water on my head. So, yeah, that worked for us for 38 days. That's the truth. However, it could have just as easily been the opposite. We could have been sitting out there with no rain hitting our boat. And a family of 7, how long do you have with no water? You don't have long. You've got 4 days. So that's my 2 cents on that. This Watermaker is really great. On Sweetest Thing, the boat I was a captain on, it had a Spectra Watermaker that made a bunch of water. I don't remember. I think it made 20-something gallons an hour. And for chartering, you absolutely need that much, But it was finicky. There was a lot more that you had to do with it. It tended to need a little more attention. I swear, when this thing's going, if you use it every day, this little Power Survivor Katadyn Watermaker, if you use it every day, it's just pretty much worry-free. You want to make sure, obviously, that you use it, because if you don't use it, then you need to pickle it. And pickling is putting in a solution that keeps the membrane from having growth grow on it. Basically, it's a poison that they put in there. Not poison. It's a biocide that keeps biological growth from growing on your membrane, and it protects the membrane. But you can only do that a few times before you actually degrade the membrane. So it's not something you want to do a lot. So that's why I recommend this one especially, because you do want to run it. If you were making 6 to 12 gallons an hour, your problem is you'd run it for a half hour, and that if you're 1 guy or 2 guys on a boat, and then you're done. Now, there are some great Watermakers, Rain Man, and those Watermakers are really great. But unfortunately, you're turning gasoline or diesel from your generator or your engine into water, because you have to run those. They draw so much power. So I'm not bad-mouthing them. I even recommended to Norman that he get a Rain Man, because he wanted one that was portable, and it met his needs, and it really is great. So without further ado, here's the install information on this little Watermaker. This is how I installed it on MIG. So let's walk through the Watermaker here. First thing we have is a through hull that I put in. It feeds the Watermaker, and it feeds the seawater pump at the galley sink. That hose goes up and into this strainer, this sea strainer. That strains out all the weed and stuff of that nature, that seaweed and stuff like that comes in. It's just a wide strainer. It's not fine. And then off of that comes the hose that goes up into the filters. The filters up here have a selector switch at the top. That selector switch, if you turn it to the aftmost or left Raycor water filter, select that, it goes to the freshwater pump at the sink. If you switch it the other way, it goes through this strainer, which then comes out of that and goes to this selector switch. And this valve, what it does is it selects whether or not the water is going to the Watermaker. If it comes down here, if it comes straight out of there, it goes to the Watermaker right here. So see that bottom one comes out and goes into the Watermaker right there. So that's what feeds the Watermaker. If you select it the other way, it goes to this long hose right here. And that is the hose that you use to bring in water to pickle the Watermaker. So you put a bucket in here filled with water that has the pickling agent in it, and then that will pickle the Watermaker when you're not going to use it for a length of time. So it goes into the Watermaker here. This top valve is the brine valve. So for every pump, you get a tiny little bit of fresh water and you get quite a bit of brine. And that goes up and out the boat in that through hole right there, which is well above the water line. Even when the boat's heeled over, it will rarely ever be far enough for that to be underwater. So it is not a through hole with a sea caulk or anything on it. And yes, I did drill the hole. I got it out of here. A lot of people are worried about, oh, they don't want that brine hole. They don't want to put a new hole in the boat. Sorry, guys. I go for simplicity when I'm dealing with this stuff. And having that brine right there in this accessible place works really well for me, and I don't mind it at all. So if you buy this boat from me someday when it's never sold, you can do something different with it. So this is the Watermaker. Back in that white housing, that is the membrane. And those on this boat are pretty easy to change out, and I do have a spare. I carry a full rebuild kit for this, which you've seen me do now, and a spare membrane. So basically I can tear this thing apart and rebuild it offshore if I needed to. If the power goes out and I can't seem to fix the power situation, this handle right here is kept right there beside it, and I can very quickly with these wing nuts unmount that, bring it out into the salon area. There's enough hose that I can use it as a hand pump, and I can pump the water by hand to get fresh water. This is the little tank that I just bought from Amazon, and that's where my fresh water that is sourced from the Watermaker ends up. That hose that you see coiled there is the tiny little hose that comes off the end right there, and that's the fresh water. It's long enough that I can put one of my 5-gallon or 6-gallon water tanks in here, and I can fill those as well with that little hose. So that, in a nutshell, is how simple it is to install one of these Katadyn Watermakers. The switch for the Watermaker is right here in the head. When you flip it on, a little light goes on. That was it. That's what you hear. There's no water, so I'm not going to run it dry, but there you go. Thanks for watching this week. I sure hope you come back next week and spend some more time on MIG. We're getting really close. Less than 3 weeks till Splash. I'm super excited. If you'd like to attend the Splash or the party the night before, give me a notice and let me know, and I'll give you all the details. All of you are welcome to come to either one. We're having a chili cook-off that Monday night at my friend Enid's house. And then the next morning at 9 a.m., the boat's going in the water. Can't wait.